things we do in December is we celebrate the anniversary of the signing of our Constitution into law. It's an important moment, and the fact that it forms the basis and the foundation of our court system. But how is that basis, how is the court system dealing with cases involving gender-based violence? So many of the people who are victims of gender-based violence are young women. Kanakana Mudzanani is a youth activist, chair of the SA Youth Economic Council. He speaks for the councils on issues around gender-based violence. Kanakana, good afternoon to you. I really do appreciate the time. In our constitution, there's a promise that everyone and women will be protected. But that's not happening. I mean, the evidence that we're failing to live up to that promise is all around us. What do you think's gone wrong?
Well, good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your viewers as well. I think you would recognize the fact that our constitution was formed on its preamble. It's reaffirming this, that it's formed on the basis of recognizing the injustices of the past, as well as to ensure that human dignity is uplifted. But here we are, 25 years into the assenting of the constitution that we praise. Women are still marginalized socially, politically, economically, and as a result, you get to see a manifestation of gender-based violence in our society because the male dominance that prevails in the South African society, enabled by the same constitution, continues to ensure that women are marginalized and therefore continue to be victims of gender-based violence.
I mean, if we look at the system, right, there's the sort of top of the system. We're going to come to that in a moment, but there's the bottom of the system, the start of the system. A woman goes to a police station and says that she's been beaten or attacked or raped, and she doesn't get the help, the treatment she should get. She doesn't get it from male police officers, or the research shows from female police officers either.
I mean, it again comes back to the fact that we have created a society that allows male dominance to prevail. And simply because you have denied women the privilege of excelling socially, politically, as well as economically, you are therefore continuing a system that continues to ensure that women are not taken serious, even at the bottom spheres of governance. I mean, if you continue to have a constitution that allows the Ingonyama Trust to lawfully say we are going to have a situation where women who are not married cannot have access to land tenure, that on its own is a serious crisis. And for as long as we are not addressing that, we are failing women on a single basis. And I totally believe that we continue to be 18 steps away from addressing the question of gender-based violence. So in essence, Stephen, what I'm trying to say is that if you don't put the necessary steps to empower women socially, politically, as well as economically, you are not doing justice to solve the plight of gender-based violence.
It's also, I mean, it's such a great example you bring up about the Ingonyama Trust. They won't appreciate you bringing it up, but I think it's absolutely correct that you did. It's also in the way we treat men, right? I mean, so men are accused of gender-based violence and they're not held accountable. There's been a recent example where we have a man boasting in an interview about how he had treated women, and nothing is going to happen to him. I mean, I don't think anything is going to happen to him. And this happens all the time, by the way. I mean, we see it happen all the time.
You know, Stephen, as I am saying, this starts domestically. It begins at home. If we are not empowering women, if we are not enabling them to ensure that they can run their households without fully being reliant on men, we are not doing justice to them. Because we are creating a society where male dominance continues to remind women that they are going to be subjected to patriarchy for as long as they rely on men. So if we take up the initiative of empowering them economically, I mean, for instance, if you go and assess the youth unemployment that currently sits at over 70%, you are going to realize that the amount of young women that are drowning in that pool are quite a lot. If you go to business and you assess the top officials or the executives, you will realize that we still have a significant shortfall of women. So those are the steps that we need to address. And as a council, we are formed on the basis of identifying such issues and ensuring that in our mandate we advocate for women empowerment, because we genuinely believe that it goes a long way. It teaches women that sometimes a society needs to be led by women in order for it to bring about an outcome that is favorable to women. If we want equity, it's about time we realize that this equity at some point must enable women to lead it.
I mean, we know symbols are important, and there's so many examples of why that is. We have now, I mean, in the governing party, I think 50% of members of parliament are women. We don't see that with premiers and mayors, but sometimes it gets a bit close to that. And we also see, for example, in formal business, let me call it the Santon boardroom, we see more and more women, more and more black women than ever before. And yet, the violence continues. It shows how much work we need to do. It shows, I think, how much work all of us, and you and I as men, also need to do.
I mean, if you draw inference from the previous local government elections and you assess the political heads of all organizations, you're going to be surprised. I mean, the top 3 parties in the country are being led by males. You even go into the political parties that we are discussing at a local level. They're all being led by males. Yet we continue to scream that gender-based violence is an issue when we are doing nothing to empower women. So as a council, we genuinely believe that it's about time we realize that women need to be empowered politically, economically, and socially. And as a result, we are going to have a situation where women empowerment even transcends into domestic environments. And as such, you are going to have young girls who dream big. You are going to have young girls who are able to stand up when they see gender-based violence occurring in the presence of their eyes. And that is how we can definitely be on the line of solving the question of gender-based violence.
I mean, also, you talk about the economy, you talk about youth unemployment, you do come from the SA Youth Economic Council. It seems the situation is getting worse and worse. And we also know from what we saw during the lockdown that lockdowns had a bigger impact on women than on men, primarily because women end up having to look after the children. So instead of actually the situation getting better, there's a big risk that over the last 2 years the situation's got worse.
The situation is getting worse and worse every single day. I mean, if you are to assess the situation in South Africa, you are going to realize that we are in a serious catastrophe. Young people account for 1/3 of the population, yet over 70% of them are unemployed. But not only that, the government continues to tell these young people that for a better life, they must entrust the NYDA, which has limited budget, to transform their livelihood. And I think that on its own is an insult on young people, but particularly on young women, because the NYDA, although it has a good mandate, it's not capacitated enough with resources to advance the interest of 1/3 of the population, which are young people, and majority of them being young women who have been affected the most by COVID. So if we are serious about addressing these issues, we really, really need to make sure that our priorities are set straight, or we are doomed for good.
Kanakana Mudzanani, thanks very much indeed. Really do appreciate it. Youth activist and chair of the SA Youth Economic Council.